Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to House of Footy. It's your boy Ray, and with me, I've got a full house. Welcome, Mac
Good evening.
and Gio.
What is good, guys?
We are back today to talk about some transfer activity since the last time we got together. We're also going to recap the Manchester United and Wolves game, and we'll also preview the upcoming games for this weekend. Before I get into it, though, don't forget to follow us on our social medias, both on Twitter and Instagram. Our handle is at @house_of_footy. Also, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to us. We are on both Spotify and YouTube. And lastly, feel free to get in touch with us via email. We love hearing from you guys, and we want you guys getting involved. Our email is houseoffooty@hotmail.com. But let's get straight into it, guys. Of course, big news in the transfer window, especially from the Chelsea side. Essentially, Chelsea's been doing to Liverpool what Barcelona did to Chelsea last year, signed all of their targets. And of course, I'm talking about your Caicedo. That saga finally ends. He's signed for a total of 133 million euros. Also, Romeo Lavia has signed from Southampton as well, another defensive midfielder that Liverpool were after, 58 million pounds there. And even Man City, they were looking at getting Olise, and he too signed for Chelsea for 41 million euros. So, Gio, I guess, Mac, can you give us some of your thoughts about those transfers for Chelsea?
If we're going to focus on the Chelsea side, and we have to start off positive, I guess we could. This is great business from Chelsea in terms of their transfer window. They have been very clinical in terms of their ins and outs. It seems like they have now more of a settled team theoretically. I do have questions if you look on the face of it, some of the individual decisions, such as Lavia, he's coming from Manchester City to go to Southampton to get game time, to now be a third choice center midfielder behind a combined duo that cost over 220 million. I'm a little bit worried about his long-term career, but great for Chelsea because they got depth in that position. Olise, same thing, where he was looking to come to the Premier League, potentially play a lot of minutes on a team. Of course, he played out of position quite a few times for Crystal Palace. But again, now going to Chelsea to probably, in all likelihood, not start. I feel like that's a tough spot for him. Of course, the young players, they have potential to grow and get better and take on those positions. So I have questions for them as individuals in their long-term career. But in terms of just the signings, what it brings to Chelsea as a whole, I absolutely love it. And as we talked about it earlier, and I think we talked about quite a bit, the Caicedo signing, a lot of money, but Chelsea had to do it. So overall, I think if you're a Chelsea fan, you're excited for the team that you kind of been able to recruit. At the outgoings, the incomings, it's pretty much done everything that you would have wanted to do, and you've done it at a good price. At least for the outgoings, incomings, ridiculous price. For whatever reason, I don't know. Maybe this is what I think. I know that's the factual opinion. But now let's go into a little bit of conspiracy theory a little bit. Do you think in the meeting with Chelsea that do they show them like Chelsea, any player that wants to be able to sign to them, like a picture of Chernobyl and be like, this is Liverpool. Do you really want to live there? It might be a little dangerous. This is a little bit scary. Or do you think that or on the other side, as Liverpool are about to submit a bid for a team, Chelsea are like knocking down their doors. They don't have scouts. They have like private investigators because they're following Arsenal last year. Now they're following Liverpool. I'm very curious about Chelsea's inner workings of how they get transfers done, because unless it's Barcelona, when they want a man, they get a man. So it's great business from them.
That's very true. I don't think they've really missed out on anyone since obviously the Barcelona fiasco from last year. I'm sure Todd Bowley's still sort of recovering from that, and so there's something going on for sure, because the way they're able to get the transfers, especially as a Liverpool fan, it just not great for us. But Gio, I guess same question for you. Are you sort of surprised about any of these transfers? Do they make sense to you on paper? What are your initial thoughts?
I think it's a lot of money for semi-proven talent. Yes, they have had decent run of forms and everything like that, but that is a lot of money to be spending on young talent. And maybe I'm not the guy to be saying, spending a lot of money on young talent, because Man U has spent their fair share of money on young talent that hasn't worked out. But to be in the position they were in last year to spend this type of money for it not to work out is a huge risk. if they sign all these players and for them to finish out of a Champions League spot, out of a European spot for that matter, it is a huge risk to them financially because if they don't make it, financial fair play is going to kick in, and they're going to have to sell some of these guys immediately the following summer. So I think Todd Bowley is, obviously is kind of going all in at this point, and it has to work. But no, I think it's still great business being, having the opportunity to sign these players. You obviously sign these players. One, it makes your squad deeper, it makes your squad better, and two, your competition doesn't have these players. So in hindsight, it's a win-win for you. Minus the fact that, again, if you don't make European football, you are utterly screwed. But yeah, no, I think they're great signings, and I think it's great that Liverpool couldn't sign any of these guys. Obviously being a Manchester fan, it's great that Liverpool can't and had to settle and sign for somebody else. But we'll get into that a little later. But I still think Twitter or X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, is still undefeated because I read, Chelsea's LFC, as in Lavia, Fernandez, and Caicedo, is going to win trophies, and LFC is not going to win trophies. So, obviously, in hindsight, it's haha, and it's great. But, we love the banter, and love to see Liverpool in a tough spot. But, obviously, great business from Chelsea.
That's fantastic. And of course, Twitter X never loses. They have always the best responses to anything that's going on. But no, it's greatly, you put it in a great way. These transfers don't look like the best transfers that they could have gotten for the cheapest prices, but it automatically improves them a little bit in terms of depth and quality overall, and also makes sure that your competition is weakened. And at this point, it kind of, is it unfair to say that Chelsea should be expected to be pushing for those Champions League positions, given the fact that they had been spending this much money? What do you guys think, Mac? Is it unfair to say they should be pushing for that without sort of Champions League or any other sort of European competitions to worry about this season?
Yes. So I think that a couple of different things that have happened is that it looks like the first time in Premier League history, the 2023-24 season will have up to 5 teams qualifying in the Premier League for the Champions League. So now it's not just a top 4, it will be a top 5. I think this is a recent change that's kind of just been pushed through because of the financial structure that the Premier League has been able to bring in and the competition level. So I think Chelsea right now, as we talked about in our preseason podcast, where I was close to putting them in the 5th spot. I think we were circling around. They were just outside. They were above Tottenham, but in the range of, let's say in the tier right below, let's say a Liverpool, but more so with maybe the Brightons, the Aston Villas, the Newcastles. They, in that group, should be the favorite as of right now, given the fact that the transfer they've been able to bring in, as well as the business that they've done in terms of their outgoings, and the fact that they only have the one competition. So I think that they should be in a good spot. The question for me is the long-term financial stability of what could potentially happen, because they've amortized these contracts over the course of not just 5 years, because most Premier League players, when they get signed to a new team, they may get 3, 4, 5-year contracts max. And what that means is that if for whatever reason the transfer doesn't go well, the shorter the window is, the quicker the club can pull the plug on that transfer and maybe offload the player because their contract's almost up for renewal. Whereas now that this Caicedo contract is up till 2031, if I remember correctly. So if it doesn't go well, given the amount of money he's making, it's going to be very difficult to offload a player who, in all likelihood, if it doesn't go well, he's going to get less wages. The only option is, and this is kind of a plug that a different team that we'll talk about later can pull, is the Saudi League or someone else coming in, parachuting in, offering obscene amount of money for a player that's not worth it. That's the only way out. But it puts the stress where if it doesn't work financially sooner rather than later, these contracts are going to be dead weight And this is very similar to the business that Manchester United used to do. Gio, I'm sure you know very well. Why it's so difficult to get rid of Harry Maguire? Because his contract is such a higher amount. He's not going to leave and take half a pay cut to go play for a lesser team. May as well just make the extra money for the extra couple of years. Now you have no choice but to sell. You can't sell him, and then you have no more wage money to be able to sign new players. So the top part for this Chelsea team is that there are favorites. They are pushing. They should get it within the top 5 spots. But if they don't, as Gio highlighted, I would say within the next 1 to 2 years, you're just going to see kind of a cascading effect on the club. So it's kind of put up or shut up time now with all these changes Todd Bowley's done.
Yeah, and it looks like very much similar to Barcelona last year, where they put sort of all their eggs in one basket, trying to make the Champions League and trying to do as well as they can in the league. That's really going to bring in more revenue so that they can sign more players. And I guess linking that to another player that Barca was briefly linked with before the move happened, Neymar, of course, is now out of PSG. There were some links about him going back to Barcelona, but eventually he's now signed for, I believe it's Al Hilal, if I'm not mistaken. I guess while I looked that up, Gio, give us your initial thoughts about that transfer. Is that disappointing for someone who still definitely can cut it in the best leagues in the world? No disrespect to the Saudi League at the moment, but what do you think that means for sort of the rest of the European teams and leagues at this moment?
I mean, it's almost sad, no? That, you know, Neymar as a player, you have to come to the realization that at this point in my career, no European club is willing to take a gamble on me at this point. With my history in terms of injuries, missing games, and things of that nature, no teams are willing to take that risk. You know, as much of a talent as you are, you're a gamble. You know, how can we count on you if you are, you know, mysteriously injured certain times of the year? I'm not going to say much about that, but yeah, I mean, I think it's sad, one, and I mean, a great career move for him, I guess, because, you know, I think if he's going to make money, it's not going to be in the MLS. If he's going to make money, it's going to be in the Saudi League right now. And maybe he goes to the Saudi League and he thoroughly enjoys himself. But at this point in his career, European football doesn't have a spot for Neymar. As good, as gifted as he is, there's just no room for him. They'd rather take a chance at, you know, a younger player, and kind of pay the younger player, because, you know, at least the younger player is gonna, you know, one, try and prove himself, because he still has a reason to prove himself, and then two, you know, that ceiling for that younger player could be much higher.
Yeah, and while there is a lot of ceiling raisers at PSG at the moment, they did sign a lot of players with this past transfer or the current going transfer window. Mbappe, there's talks about him, you know, rejoining the team after sort of, there's been, I think, initial talks of him renewing the contract. Of course, that's a great move for PSG, getting that contract out, getting Neymar's contract out of their sort of budget. But yeah, how does this look for Neymar and or PSG in the short term? What do you think?
In the short term, PSG are now in a position where they can go back to Mbappe. It's like, hey, they've gotten the players that you want to be able to get out of this club. It seems like he's been re-embraced back with the team. He's back in training, so he may be in a position to get back on the field. And supposedly, from reports, that he's open conversation to potentially stay at the club for further than this year, considering their exodus. None of that in the long term for me makes sense. I don't get. If you look at the lineup that they have on the pitch, the drop in talent from these last couple of years to this year is precipitous. It's quick. It's quite horrendous, to be honest. But this puts now Mbappe in the position to say, hey, if we have a clean slate, we don't have any of these things to worry about. Maybe I can build the team I want, and he can all be that player manager that he seems he wants to be at club level. So I think short term, PSG are in that position to see if they can make this work long term, because at the very worst, the transfer out to go to any other club, and it was not feasible, did not make any sense, and Mbappe was not willing to do at the moment. So it seemed like it was the only way to go. I do want to jump on in terms of Gio's comments about Neymar as well in terms of his change of what this could mean for him. It's. I think this will be a reckoning in terms of financial structures for some teams where there's a lot of money going into the Premier League, yes, but some of these, I guess, country-owned clubs are in the position to offer an obscene amount of wages. Where Neymar's wages, let's say, is last year at PSG was at 40.8 million Great British pounds, as an example. Anthony Gordon, who, if you were to go over to Newcastle, whereas something that I had talked about potentially is like, okay, Newcastle looking to spend money, what could they do? His cap hit, which is his most reported contract when he was at Everton for last year, was £520,000. So just the difference between that level of player, there is a difference. But the financial difference is the Grand Canyon size. It's too great where it doesn't make sense where these players are going to be priced out at playing at the premier clubs. I guess the only thing that could change this, and this may be, I think it's unfair to compare it as much to Ligue 1, but reports are now the Saudi League is pushing to have a spot in the Champions League as early as next season, which if that happens, then that enters a different conversation if they're able to compete in the Champions League. I personally don't see it happening. That's just my initial thoughts, at least right now. It'll probably be a couple summers, a couple transfer windows of action like this to enter that more of the realm, to a realm of reality. But otherwise, I think this is probably going to have a knock-on effect where these superstar players probably can't get these obscene amount of wages as they previously gone, because now they're going to be in a position we can't play in the competition that everyone cares about. So I think this potentially has the chance to be a culture shift in what the soccer player growing up, the football player growing up is looking for. Not just chasing money. Money's great, but you're missing out on the biggest competitions, and that's probably what everyone cares about.
Yeah, and that's going to be a big decision to be made from not just future players, but of course, future players as well, but even in the short term, your big name players that are up for contract renewals in the next couple of years. So something to keep an eye out for that. But I guess let's round up this part of the podcast talking about a big game that took place early this week, guys. Manchester United 1, Wolves 0. Gio, a great result at the end of the day. A win is a win for Man U, but based on sort of the notes that you have for us here, not the most convincing win at all. What were your thoughts on that?
A tough watch. A tough watch indeed. I thought, Wolves started off great. They were kind of hitting Man U on the counter, driving the ball at I would argue a less, agile line. Apart from obviously Basaka. I think Varane's turn and go is a little slow. I think Lissandro Martinez was caught off guard, quite a few times. So I just think overall, they weren't prepared, and they were definitely underestimating Wolves, expecting, kind of Wolves to kind of bend over and kind of give them the 3 points. But, at any given time, it seemed like Wolves can really take the ball and drive it down, Man U's throat and score. At many times we thought they were gonna score. Had they a little bit, better finishing, they could have been up 2-0 very early in the game. So, obviously, there are bad wins in this world, and this definitely was a bad win. Were they really deserving of it? No, definitely not. I don't think they're deserving of the win. Am I happy they got a win? Yeah, absolutely. It keeps them in the race, with the first group of winners in the first week of the Premier League. So, much to improve on. I think Bruno was bad. I think Mason Mount. The effort was there, but I don't think the statistics showed. I thought he was poor. I think Rashford didn't show glimpses of pep in his step until he decided to pull himself by the byline, where he is naturally more comfortable. He's not a number 9. I don't think he wants to be a number 9 at the end of the day. And he just seemed very, uncomfortable there. I would say the only bright spot was Basaka and maybe Anthony, who surprisingly was backtracking a lot of the game and was putting in a fair challenge and was trying to win the ball back and was making runs for, Basaka, and, trying to make those runs in behind to try to make those, backdoor passes. But, those backdoor passes never really found him. So was quite unfortunate. I thought those two were, the biggest bright spots of the game, and were deserving of a shout out.
That's interesting that you mentioned those two specific players because out of that possible lineup, those wouldn't have been the players that I've been watching from Man U at the very start. But very interesting because then that really tells you how, I guess, poorly some other players played. And Mac, I guess you're going to lay down the hammer now. What are your thoughts on that performance by both Manchester United and Wolves?
So first to start off, great for Manchester United to be able to pick up a win initially. That's what you want. The poor part is, I think in every facet of the game, they were naive, they were poor. Wolves sussed them out exactly what their game plan was from the jump, where they allowed the ball to be able to go into Wan-Bissaka's feet and made him be the decision maker in terms of how to break out from the pass. You saw Luke Shaw try to be able to step into midfield, a la like a Zinchenko, a Cancelo, that type of player. Wasn't a great fit there. Casemiro was on an island. Even within like the first 60 seconds, the ball went back to Onana, played to Wan-Bissaka. He had no options. As soon as the ball triggered, you see Matheus Cunha, you see a Wolves player kind of ready to be able to spring a trap and track them down. And that's why you saw Anthony isolated a lot in one-on-one positions where he had to come back and be able to help out. So I feel like this is the first game of Ten Hag trying to play kind of this new type of system in the Premier League. They've been figured out already. They have to learn, they have to evolve, they have to adapt, they have to grow. They got to do it quick because even though this Wolves team, I would argue, is not very good, in fact, is very, very poor, it's always going to be a tough game in the Premier League. You need to be able to make sure that you're playing at a higher level consistently to beat these better teams. This is just the first step, but we'll talk about later. Manchester United have a quick challenge right around the corner. In regards to Wolves, just in regards to Wolves, Matheus Cunha, like I said, probably a stand-up player, looked phenomenal. You can see why there's so many links to different clubs of what he could be, maybe at a bigger club. I'd be interested to see if that does happen. But Manchester United definitely need to kind of step their game up. And we're very, like I said, very, very naive. And then lastly, I apologize, Casemiro on an island. You can see why were people so worried about a Mount, Bruno midfield with Casemiro left on an island. And lastly, Manchester United, if after your first game, Mason Mount's brother has to go on Twitter and defend him after one professional game, this is the, you guys, people need to chill. So it's early days, you got the win, you played horribly, but you got to give them time to improve, and they need to improve.
Just off of that, I hope Harry Maguire's brother has been taking notes. If he has a brother and or family member that could come in, because that would definitely help. But Joe, sorry, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to add on to Mac's point. Casemiro looked slow. He was chasing every ball, every which direction, and he was behind it every single time. Passing was off. Just everything was just poor. Like it was almost night and day from him. During the preseason. Preseason he actually looked better, slimmer even. But first game in the season, he just looked 3 steps slow. The turns were slow. The challenges in were slow. And just it was a complete shock to me how overall that midfield in which which I kind of had higher hopes for, just performed so poorly, and it was so blatant that there was no cohesiveness throughout this team. Even trying to feed Rashford balls, that couldn't even happen. And you saw the frustration in Rashford's face, and that's why he took it upon himself to really pull himself out wide to be able to get the ball. And once he got the ball out wide, the way he was able to thread passes through the overlap run from Shaw, find a better seam, he was able to do that from that position. So overall I think the game plan was poor or either wasn't executed to Ten Hag's liking. But again, week 1, you kind of have to take it and kind of move on. You got the 3 points, you kind of just move on from there.
They miss Fred.
That's definitely one of the players that they will be missing for the next season and for seasons to come. But no, it's greatly put. Still same first game of the season. A lot of teams are not going to be up to speed, but it is concerning the performance that they put out. End of the day, though, a win's a win. And just before we wrap up, of course, we do have to quickly mention thoughts on that pen. So, guys, can we all agree that it was a pen, Mac? What do you think?
It was such a clear and obvious pen that the referees are not working next weekend.
There we go. Gio, agree?
That he was not playing. He should be in the UFC.
Exactly. All right, guys. So we're gonna take a quick break here. Then we'll be back previewing some of the weekend's games. So stay with us, please. Welcome back to House of Footy, guys. We are gonna continue today's podcast now, discussing a little bit about Man City first. Man City will be facing Newcastle, but of course, at day of recording, Man City did become Super Cup champions, beating Sevilla in penalties. For that, of course, Super Cup that I just mentioned. They did have a peculiar lineup. They did go back with the back four of Kyle Walker, Akanji, Tanaka, and Gvardiol. Phil Foden, Rodri, and Kovacic as the midfield three, and then Cole Palmer, Erling Haaland, and Jack Grealish as the forwards. A game where it looked like Sevilla had a lot of chances on the break in the first half, and then Man City really dominated second half with possession, but it took a Cole Palmer header at the back post for them to get back into the game, and so they did eventually go on to win in penalties, but that does give us a little bit of question about the lack of firepower that Man City have, especially considering now that, of course, since we last spoke, Kevin De Bruyne has been ruled out for a few months, Mac, and we already were talking about some of their problems going forward and scoring goals. This team that scored so many goals last year, they'll be missing their main assist provider and Kevin De Bruyne. So, Mac, walk us through sort of some of those problems that Man City are going through.
I think this is not hugely dissimilar. I know it's a different time of their respective seasons, but for me, this is very similar to Golden State back in the day when Kevin Durant got hurt, and it kind of felt like the league opens up. There is an opportunity now. If you have Kevin De Bruyne out for potentially up to 3 to 4 months, City could be in a position where they fall behind in the table to such a point where there's not as much of an opportunity for them to be able to recover because a key injury to one of their two best players, clearly, if not, in my opinion, the most important player because of what he's able to be creatively, offensively, and still have the legs and work right defensively to be able to help out his team. The pressure now further mounts on Rodri and Haaland, where even if there's a small knock for any amount of time period, even if it's for a week or two, they're going to be in stressful times. It's going to be stressful days for Manchester City fans, for the few of them out there. So I think overall, it's going to be, I think, a tough shake of things for what it'll look like. On the other side of the coin, though, in terms of the transfer window, there's still time for a potential recovery in terms of players that they could bring in to be able to get some help. And I think that reinforcements now more than ever are needed. It's not just in the midfield position. They need players out wide, in both deep line playmaker, attacking midfielder, and winger positions. Their only saving grace really is Bernardo Silva agreed to sign for 1 extra year. So all they've done is put a Band-Aid on to wait to that problem is going to continue to happen next year where he's going to be in want away position again. So I feel like it's a rough time right now for City fan. You're winning cups, you're winning trophies, but it's kind of like a death by 1,000 cuts because you're getting injuries, players are leaving. Laporte's now just gone. So I think that overall it can be tough days ahead for the City team.
Yeah, it's kind of weird to see Man City in a spot where they're kind of lacking long-term succession planning, and especially with signing Erling Haaland a few months before the season ended 2 seasons ago, and he knew, of course, that he was going to be the starting striker for Man City. It's a big spin here, but Gio, of course, Man City have been linked with some reinforcements, the likes of Lucas Paquetá, Dani Olmo as well, and even I think Jeremy Doku as another potential forward there. What are your thoughts about some of those potential incoming signings? Is it a little too late? Will they be able to sort of mesh well with this Man City squad that Pep likes to run? People are saying Pep likes to run a small squad, which he has done especially last season, but do you think at this point it's too small? What are your thoughts?
No, I think it is too small at this point. And again, we've discussed this before. Who stepped in to help KDB in that time of need? It was Ilkay Gundogan. You can't just bring anyone and assume that caliber of player or the caliber of play will be replicated. Now, Danny Almo, obviously, is can score, can do a lot of things. Odoku, has been successful in other leagues. Yes, you can bring those players in, but again, we talk about this Premier League transitional period. Can they, fit into that not only the Premier League, but a Pep system in a Premier League? So that's obviously a lot of additional time that requires them to learn, for them to pick up a lot of things, to pick up a lot of keys and cues that Pep likes. So you know to to put that risk or to make that jump to sign those players, I think is a little much. So now they have to look at it in the sense that, look, can we sign multiple players to help this team, or are we gonna kind of put all our eggs in one basket and sign a Lucas Paqueta, because we're gonna have to shell out a lot more money for this guy. He is Prem ready. He may not be Pep ready, but I think he is Prem ready enough that he can learn on the fly. So I think it's a double-edged sword. But Man City is gonna have to take that risk, whichever route is more accepting. I think is less resistance to complete. I think they'll go because they are smart. Pep is smart. I don't think he'll overpay, but he has done it before in signing Jack Grealish when we thought, Jack Grealish for 100 mil was a lot of money at that time. But again, he took, he was also from the Prem, but it also took him a year to learn Pep system. So I think either way, it's going to be hard for them, and nobody is gonna think it's a great signing. But they're going to have to do something in terms of depth.
Yeah, and it's great you put it. It's not just making a move into the Premier League; it's making a move into a Pep Guardiola Premier League team, which is, of course, one of the toughest tasks for, I think, any footballer in the world. Having a manager that's so meticulous in his details. So something to watch there, especially because the transfer window closes in September, and there's only a couple of weeks left. Speaking of quick turnarounds, though, Mac, Newcastle are going to be hosting Man City this weekend, two teams who started the season very, very well, scoring multiple goals in their first game. This is going to be a huge one, even in the second week of the season. Man City might actually be looking like they might be not favorites for this game, considering how well Newcastle did in the first game. But what are your thoughts on this upcoming game?
I think Newcastle are going to come out full guns blazing, and Manchester City are going to feel like they were hit by a bucket of ice cold water with the amount of pressure, with the amount of intensity this Newcastle team comes out with. It's early on in the season. We've talked about before that they do have the Champions League to worry about. Not yet. So they're going to come out ready to be able to fight, ready to scrap. And you're going to feel like, I think that City are going to try to kind of pace in and breathe into the game. This is not dissimilar, in my opinion, to their matchup last year, where it was high octane, very entertaining, but Manchester City had a little bit more juice, had a little bit more quality in the squad. Whereas now this year, I would argue, in their current position, their current standings, Newcastle have that little bit more of an edge, where instead of this being a 3-3 entertaining tie, I think that Newcastle can potentially come out on top. And I don't think it's unfair for you to say that Newcastle could be looked at as more of a favorite, considering the schedule load up, the injuries, everything going against Manchester City, and everything in favor of Newcastle. So I think it's going to be an entertaining game, one that I'm going to have my eyes on absolutely. And I think it's going to be a good bellwether for each team of, okay, if City do come out with everything against them right now and come out and kind of just put thrashing to a Newcastle team of where they are, we're going to look at them differently and everything. And I will eat crow for what I said earlier about them, but vice versa for Newcastle. If they come out, they'll be like, hey, they might not just, are they ready for the next step up from just being in a top four conversation? And that's what we'll end the weekend on, depending on how this result goes. So I think it's an enthralling matchup and definitely the game of the weekend, without a doubt.
Yeah, for sure.
For Gio. Sorry, we'll talk about his game of the weekend later.
We'll definitely get there, but of course, Gio, the main one right now, Newcastle, Man City. It's kind of weird thinking Man City are underdogs going into this game. But like I said, Newcastle at home is a different beast in the Premier League. I think it's very important for for Man City to, it's weird, to weather the storm in the first early stages and then eventually sort of dominate possession and kind of bring the crowd down and bring themselves back and sort of keep the ball at higher parts of that field into the Newcastle area to sort of have a chance in this game. But what are your thoughts, Gio, on this game?
I think if Pep kind of almost says, guys, we're in a tough spot. Let's try and hold the ball a little longer and kind of wait for our chance. I think Newcastle are a side with enough depth that they're going to be able to put that pressure to chase the ball, press high, and win the ball. You know, as good as Rodri is, as good as John Stone has been, as good as Kyle Walker is, they're going to be able to press and they're going to be able to keep up. Anthony Gordon, immense pace to do so. Tonali is able to do so as well. You know, Almiron, Callum Wilson, you name it. Newcastle is and Eddie Howe are able to put out a lineup that's going to be able to disrupt the flow of Man City. They have players like Joe Linton, who's able to go out there and put a bone crushing tackle to send Foden into next week and take a card and be perfectly content with that, because you know what? That's what Eddie Howe expects him to do, and that's what he will do for Eddie Howe. So, you know, I think although, you know, the odds you know, are in favor of Man City because they are Man City, and they are of what they were, you know, most recently, and that's champions. Then yeah, you have to kind of favor them. But in terms of putting it on paper and really just breaking it down and understanding that Man City has flaws in their team right now and holes in their team, I think Newcastle, you know, I'll take Newcastle as an underdog any day of the week this weekend. And it's a better, you know, it's better odds, you know, that Newcastle can leave with a win.
Yeah, like you mentioned, that midfield battle is going to be very interesting because, like you said, Newcastle do have a very, very industrious midfield, to say the least. Of course, all three of those, Bruno Guimaraes, Sandro Tonali, and Joe Linton, not afraid to get stuck in. And so it's going to be very interesting to see how they disrupt that possession style that Pep likes to play. So very, very interesting match to watch on this weekend, and we'll definitely cover that. But I guess we'll wrap up the podcast with another big game, and of course, Mac just mentioned it. It's the Geo Derby. Spurs will be hosting Man U. A new look Spurs will be hosting Man U, and so I guess Gio, how do you expect Man U to sort of bounce back? I wouldn't say really bounce back in terms of result, but in terms of performance against a Spurs team that only got a draw in the first game.
Um, I'm worried if this is the same menu team that's being put out, and this is the tactics that they, you know, kind of were instructed to go out there and run. I'm worried because there are more talented players and more clinical players that we're facing against Spurs. Son is far more clinical. James Madison, being able to put that ball through to Son, or God forbid, Richarlison, is more clinical. The only person probably not as clinical is Richarlison. So, you know, I'm worried. I shouldn't be worried this early in the season, but I'm worried because, you know, Spurs have been known to kind of smash Man United. You know, they have early on in the season in the past, and you know, Man United have let leads go against Spurs. Granted, you know, a Harry Kane's Spur, but still, you know, the history against Spurs isn't great, and I think they need to come with better tactics and a better mentality. You know, hopefully they pull Rashford to the side and let him start there. But if it's anything like the Wolves game, I think Spurs of all teams have enough clinical ability to put goals into the back of the net if those same mistakes were made.
Yeah, and Spurs, of course, a new coach, new sort of system, and definitely players that are going to be looking to impress their new manager. I think they're going to want to get off to a good start and a strong start against a Man U team that might not be settled. What do you think about that approach, Mac? Is that sort of the way they should look to get into this Man U team?
So I'm going to call something a little bit. Well, I think Ray, you might get excited about this idea. I'm calling the first red card of the season for Manchester United in this game. In this game, tell me. Okay, so the explanation being is that if the Manchester United play it the exact same way they played against Wolves, I think they're going to be sussed out, and I think Tottenham have the tools in their tool belt to exploit this Manchester United team, especially out wide. Because if you have Luke Shaw tucking into the midfield, which to be frank, he's not that great at, and you have a Kulusevski one-on-one with Alessandro Martinez on the break. If Wan-Bissaka misplaces possession and Son or Madison are able to pick it up inside, inside kind of just outside Manchester United's 18. I'm waiting for a Casemiro red card, a quick early foul, maybe even a time waste yellow card. I could see anyone on that back line getting a red very, very quickly, along with Casemiro. That's how I think this game could go. However, I think this, even though this might be a step regressive for what Manchester United's approach would be, they're playing away. They have the opportunity to say, okay, we don't have to dominate possession. We don't have as much of the stress in terms of our home fans right there. Let's see if we can see if Tottenham can break down us. Let's see what they can do, and we can play back on the counter. It's regressive, a step back of what Ten Hag wants, but given what he has right now and how poorly it worked in the first game, he may make that switch. I don't foresee it happen. I think he's going to do this early in the season. We're going to play who we are. We're going to see how it goes. It's very early on. We're not going to panic. But I think this might be one of the games, considering we still have a lot of question mark from Spurs, who are coming off a tie. Not a great result, not a great performance. If your kind of path out for any result is you're getting Emerson Royale to score from 22 yards, you probably lucked out. Let's be frank here. So I think this would have been an opportunity if you're be a little pragmatic, take a step back, see if they can play on the counter. I don't see it happening. I see Manchester United struggling in possession, and unless Spurs shoot themselves in the foot, which they're fully able to, I think it's going to be a tough time for Manchester United's defense and their possession game to be able to break down the Spurs team.
I just wanted to mention that actually there was already a red card in the first game week given to a Burnley player. I think it was Zarari.
Yeah,
but
first red
no,
card for
I do
Man U.
agree.
And passing your hopefully
Very fair.
for my preseason prediction, please. Help me out.
I mean, I can definitely see it because it's something about these games that are, they're going to be taking. So I think this game is, if I'm not mistaken, Saturday 12:30, one of those later games during the day, and it's something where, it's kind of getting into the evening. The crowd's going to be ready for it. Of course, this is a big game, so tension is going to be high, and again, both sets of players are going to be trying to prove themselves to their respective managers. I see a very, very open game here, and I do see a high-scoring game as well. There will be mistakes, I think, with what I've sort of read about this. The way Postecoglou coaches his team is they like to go forward in numbers, but leave a lot of space and behind in the back, which perfectly suits Man U if, like you predicted, Mac, they can play on the counter. But also, if Man U are going to try to play out of pressure from the back, Onana is definitely a step up, but you're not sure if they are sort of ready to employ that system this early on and in this sort of high pressure situation. So I do predict a lot of goals, which as a neutral, someone doesn't really have any skin in the game for these two teams. Very, very looking forward to that match. But I guess final predictions from both of you boys for this game before we wrap up. Firstly, of course, Gio, can Man U get the second win of the season, or do you think it's going to be a Spurs favorable result?
They can. Again, it will be another scrappy win, I think. But I think they will salvage it. Just based on their ability out wide, I don't think Spurs will be able to keep up. I think they'll be able to drag out defenders. Hopefully, they try to run in behind. They try to pull them forward and run in behind a little more, because I think, player for player, I think Man U is much pacier and will beat them, in the open space. So, that long ball down, drag him in, long ball across, I think is going to be very key. So hopefully Bruno's on his A game. Hopefully Mason Mount's on his A game, because, they're the wingers are going to be making those runs. So that's, I think, their best way, their best chance at beating Spurs, and hopefully they exploit that.
Okay, and same question for you, Mac. I just give us a prediction for the final result.
Again, I want a 2-2 tie, red card, Manchester United. That's what I'm feeling. I think that would be a great day for me.
I'm looking forward to it. I'll do you one better. It's going to be 3-3 tie because I just think it's going to be a lot of goals. Vicario from Spurs, I think he's not settled yet. Of course, he's new to the Premier League, and so he might concede a lot. And then, there's holes on both ends, so it's going to be an open game, and I love that. So we'll definitely keep an eye out for that result, boys. But this concludes our podcast for today. If you like what you heard, please like and subscribe to us on our social medias. That's at @house_of_footy. If you have any comments, suggestions, or general banter, get in touch with us via email as well, houseoffooty@hotmail.com. The next time you hear from us will be Monday when we review this weekend's Premier League games. But that's all from us today. Thank you, Mac.
Jerry Timber, get better soon. I don't want to see Rob Holding.
Thank you, Gio.
Newcastle and Man U. Put the house on it, boys.
And of course, Liverpool didn't get Enzo, so we got Endo instead. Peace out, guys.